Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good morning and welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. It is Wednesday the 16th of July. It's nearly the end of term, hooray! And you are listening to The Morning Break with Liz and Kate. How's your week been, Kate?
It's been fabulous. It's been activities week at the school and I've been bizarrely supervising football matches and dodgeball without much knowledge of that, but it's been fantastic. How about you?
Business as usual. It's been, sunny, hot, 32 degrees in the classroom. Everyone's winding down.
Ready for the holidays.
Everyone's ready for the holidays. Everyone's ready. I'm very excited about our topic today. I'm going to try really hard to say it without singing it. So let's talk about sex education. Kate, please introduce our lovely guest.
Okay, I'm very happy to introduce the lovely Rachel Gilyeat. She's a good friend of mine and an ex-colleague. She is a secondary school teacher of English and drama, as well as a subject leader in PSHE. She is a specialist in relationships and sex education and delivers material to students, predominantly boys, but we refer to them as students in case of trans non-binary students in years 7 to 13. Rachel also teaches media and film studies and runs the Pride group at her school. She has 20 years of teaching experience, and also 80 years of teaching experience. And also works as a freelance educator, a private tutor, and as an examiner for AQA. Welcome, Rachel.
Good morning. It's fine that you said 25. It feels like it's been 108. So never mind.
It feels like that after about 3 years in education,
yes.
doesn't it? You feel like once you put your feet under the table, that's it.
It's like dog years. Teacher years are different.
That's so accurate.
Once you're in the cult, whether you become a tutor like me after teaching, or whether and I'm an intervention tutor in a school, or whether you are fully in the classroom, it never really goes away,
No, it doesn't. And it is like riding a bike after a while, isn't it? It's just, oh my gosh, I'm feeling all the innuendos already. I'm so hyper aware of it.
It's going to be a minefield.
Yes.
But it's going to be fun. We'll laugh. It'll be great. It's all good.
Talk about sex live on the radio. What could possibly
go wrong? Absolutely. So, Rachel, how does an English and drama teacher end up kind of segueing into relationships and sex education?
Well, the first thing I need to sort of preface this with is that my mum was a sex education nurse after being a midwife. So although I didn't have any aspirations to go in that direction, I think I've always had a very frank and open relationship about discussing these kind of things. And in a way, I think when the job came up to be a subject leader for PSHE, and I was kind of looking for a different direction for my career, as I started to prepare for the interview, because we had to give a presentation, I started to realise how much I cared about a lot of those topics. And although I care very deeply about English and drama, and that's the subjects I've specialised in for years, I realised that the role of PSHE in young people's development and preparation for the world is huge. And I think for me, it's become a bit of a calling and a bit of a passion to make sure that the students that I teach have all the information that they need to make the best choices they can make given the circumstances. And that's across the board, not only with sex and relationships. But as is obviously the part and parcel of being a subject leader, is you have to lead from the front. And let's face it, some teachers are incredibly nervous about delivering relationships and sex education.
I was, until I actually did it for the first time, and then it actually was fine. I think in kind of the run up to this, I told you guys the story of where I had to do the condom demonstration lesson, and it was my colleague and I were doing it at the same time because we had extended registration, so everybody was delivering PSHE at the same time. It was done by tutors rather than kind of anyone coming in specialist. And we were in the RSE topic, and we knew it was coming. And my colleague came into my room. He said, "Oh, I'll go and collect the models for you." So he came in like the creepiest Santa in the world with his black sack full of blue penises, and obviously had the condom. We had to count the condoms in, count them out, so they weren't running around school afterwards like blowing them up and whatever. And doing the demonstration, we split the boys and girls in half, and I was so nervous to do it. And then actually when I was doing it, it was absolutely fine. I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt quite weirdly confident about doing it, because actually you kind of have to be the confident one in the room, because otherwise that's going to make them more nervous about it. And it was fine. And I got asked, a student tried to embarrass me with a question that she asked, and I said, "I don't think you want to tug at that thread." And she was like, "Oh no, I don't want to tug at that thread at all." But now if I was asked to do it again, I don't think I'd be as bothered as I thought. And I think don't know why that is.
I think, as you said, when you set a tone and an attitude, often the students will follow suit, because they actually are interested in what you have to say. Even yesterday when I had a class, I said, okay, we're going to be talking about periods, and this is obviously to a class of predominantly boys. So you get your general kind of, Monday or Tuesday, sorry, I've forgotten what day it is, Tuesday afternoon kind of thing. But someone said, oh no, this is actually really interesting, because they want to know. They do want to know. And as you said, it's a bit of, if you show fear and nerves, they will also be nervous and not know what to do with themselves.
You mentioned about what was it? Just don't blink first. Could you explain that again? About not what? So they ask a question, you ask a question. What happens if you don't know the answer to a question that a student asks?
For me personally, I've never had a question I haven't known the answer to. I've had questions that I've been very reluctant to answer because it might reveal personal experience. I think that's a minefield in and of itself. So if you don't know the answer, like anything, I mean, I would never proclaim to know absolutely everything about media or film or literature. And I would definitely say to them, I don't know, but that's really interesting. I will find out and I will get back to you. I think you've got to put yourself out there as being equally ignorant at times of certain things that you don't know. We aren't able to know everything about everything. And I think if you present yourself as someone who needs to learn things too, there's a difference between that and being nervous. I think there's humility and saying I don't know, but I'll find out is an absolutely fine way to be. But as I said, I've had questions more so where I've been unable to answer. For example, I would never discuss sexual technique or anything like that, because that's a line that you don't go down. Nor do you share personal anecdotes about your sex life, for example, because that isn't something you want to do. And you kind of try to encourage the students not to do similar. And sometimes, especially with the younger students, they will be very open about their own experience, or even sometimes their parents and what they've said to them about things. And sometimes that is fine. And sometimes you've got to kind of shut it down in a way that it doesn't become fodder for bullying outside of lessons. But one of the reasons that we do sex education quite early on, and that I think is very important, is that you need to teach young people what sex is in reality and how it is a part of adult consensual relationships. And sometimes the sad fact of it is that our students are in situations that are not healthy, and if they learn about this kind of thing in school and from someone who is an objective teacher, it sometimes can be a safeguarding issue, and it can lead that student to be able to recognize that whatever is going on at home that may not be healthy is something that they need to talk about, and it's something that's really important.
I totally agree with that. I think it's providing that safe space, isn't it? And that kind of all comes down to you setting the tone at the beginning and then feeling like it's a safe space. That's really important. And I think also providing that opportunity for them to ask questions, even if they don't ask questions in the lesson, for them to feel like they can approach you outside of a lesson so they can ask you that question. I think that's absolutely crucial, that they they have that space, because like you say, they might not ask it at home, and they do live in an environment now, in a world where I think they are overly sexualized. They are exposed to such material because they're carrying a computer around in their pockets. They're exposed to so many things which out of context might seem like the norm, but are very much not the norm, and they need to understand that, so they're entering and conducting healthy relationships, hopefully not necessarily immediately, but at some point in their lives.
Yes, I think you're absolutely correct. We've got to understand that once a student gets to a certain point, they are very likely to understand, if not have seen, pornography. And we need to set that in context in a healthy discussion and a healthy fashion, and make sure that they don't think that is a realistic depiction of what sexual relationships are. It has its place. You know, ever since somebody invented the camera or film, that's what people have been doing, as well as artists painting naked people. We need to be able to say to them that this is a thing. There's no point in being frightened, curious, or otherwise about it. Let's demystify the whole situation, and let's talk about what it's about and why it exists. And then you get a sense of an open discussion and open understanding. If you hide from these things and think, bury your head in the sand and think my little angel will not have come across this on the internet, or friends will not have spoken to them about it, then you're in denial that it's out there. And yes, the internet is a marvelous but dangerous place, and we are absolutely responsible for equipping young people with the ability to understand, decipher, and make their peace with what the internet is like.
And I think sometimes they feel more comfortable to do that at school, don't they, then perhaps they will with their parents. They'll feel embarrassed with their parents, maybe less so with, like you said, an objective person. And it just provides them with that space. Do you find, because you are teaching it predominantly to boys, does that change the way that you deliver it?
I think when I first started delivering it, I thought it would, but over time, I don't think it does. You've got to remember that two things are going on when I'm in front of the boys. One, I've taught at the school for many years, and I'm kind of a bit of the furniture. So, you know, they know what I'm like.
Furniture.
Oh, thanks. So, you know, they sometimes forget that you are female and will ask you the same questions they would ask anyone else. Although I do think that they need to at some point have a male member of staff potentially delivering certain information or having a discussion with them, because I think a male perspective is incredibly helpful, and having a male role model to talk about issues of sex from a male perspective, I think is also very helpful. But I think for me, it doesn't necessarily change how I deliver the material, because of the material I deliver in an incredibly frank and straightforward fashion. And a couple of things that I say to them right at the beginning when you're kind of establishing the way of working is, number one is, why am I talking about this, and why are we not leaving it to your parents to do? And one of the things I say to them is that I don't look at you as 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds or my little angel growing up into a man and blah de blah and are feeling sentimental about it. Your parents are terrified of you growing up. I'm not terrified of you growing up. I'm interested in watching you grow and change into, hopefully, healthy, balanced, valuable members of society. So I can do this without worrying about that I'm saying things out of context. And one of the other things I will say to them is that I will answer any of their questions, but they have to understand that it's about being respectful. And I will do my best to answer anything they want to know about. But I will treat them with the same level of respect as they treat me. And yes, things do get funny. And yes, you have to laugh at it, because bodies are funny. They make funny noises, they do funny things, and sex and bodily functions will never grow old, even when you are 85 bodily. In fact, they might even be more amusing, you know, so we can't escape that fact.
I think that leads us nicely into, Liz, that anecdote you told me about the boys. Can we please?
Right, okay, so in English, obviously you guys are familiar with it. For anyone who isn't an English teacher, when we're teaching students to write, we teach them the acronym purpose, audience and form. So they've got to identify the purpose of the text they're being asked to write, the audience of the text they're being asked to write, and the form. So before they start writing it, to make sure they hit the criteria, they're doing all the right things. So teaching that to a class, teaching purpose, audience and form. So I said to them, so PAF or FAP, however you're going to remember it. And the class just fell apart in front of me. And I said to them, what have I said that I don't know that I've said? And they were like, Miss, don't you know? I was like, well, obviously I don't know, or I wouldn't have asked the question. I wouldn't have said it. So come on, tell me, what have I said? And they went, we can't tell you. I said, please tell me so I don't make the same mistake again. You have to inform me. And then they said, just say it several times fast. So I thought about it and was like, oh,
you got to say it several times.
Okay. I'm not saying it. It's 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm not saying it. And I was like, oh, okay. I said, thanks for educating me, guys. I've learned something. So yes, it stays PAF. It will stay PAF forever now. And it always comes screaming back to me. Whenever I teach it, I'm like, PAF, 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 PAF. Like, I can't. Don't say anything else.
I've been teaching that for years. I wondered recently they've changed it to GAP, genre, audience, purpose. And I wondered why, but maybe it's because of that.
Had to get rid of one element of it to make it more palatable, to make sure nobody makes any mistakes. I'm going to pause to do the ad reads. So, have you subscribed to our weekly newsletter yet? It's called Sound Bites and Insights and delivered to 10,000 educators every week. It contains a curated selection of 4 standout TTR shows from the week, exclusive discounts and exclusive offers from our sponsors. You can sign up on our website at ttradio.org/newsletter. Also, this show is brought to you by John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. And if you use the code JCTTR2425, you can get 20% off your order. And if you love to listen to a podcast and you fancy thinking about teaching a little bit more, you can also listen to the Chalk and Talk podcast. It is by Anna Stoke. She's a passionate advocate for evidence-based math education for students of all ages. On her podcast, she talks about everything from effective teaching methods and how-to guides for teaching math facts to tips for evaluating research shows claims. She brings on top-notch guests, educators, researchers, policymakers, and discusses issues that directly impact teachers and students. Chalk and Talk is for anyone interested in education. Find it wherever you get your podcasts. Right.
I have a question, Miss. First of all, they call you Mom at school, right? As well.
Yes.
I found this very funny that you're teaching sex education and relationships to students that call you Mom, like as if you're the queen.
It is a funny dichotomy of language in that room. The sort of ultimate level of respect with casual words thrown about that are perhaps not so. But it just adds to the hilarity of the whole situation.
Yes. Is this how you put on a condom, Mom?
Mom.
Which brings me to props. So can you talk us through a typical session? What props you bring? I think Liz about this.
Yes, as Liz was discussing the models, we call them demonstrators. Model seems to imply a long string of people walking into the room, but demonstrators, yes. So when I first took the job, I do remember making a bit of a blooper really early on, actually. Is I emailed a member of the PSHE staff and said, do you need me to order any more penises? Because I think someone mentioned that you'd lost a few and blah, 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 blah. And he emailed me back and said, I think I have enough demonstrators. Thank you very much. And I was sort of put in my place of like, oh, okay, that's the word I need to use. So yes, a typical session. Well, obviously, it depends what year group you're teaching to. But for example, if we were doing a condom demonstration lesson, then we would probably start with something to do with consent, which I think is the cornerstone of nearly everything that we do when we're talking about any kind of sexual activity. And then we would talk about respect and intimate relationships, because I think that the absolute thing about sex and relationships education is it should be in that order. Relationships and sex education, it needs to be in that order. When they first brought that acronym in, they messed about with it a few times and put the sex first and then the relationships. And I think you need to talk about intimacy, you need to talk about respect, and using condoms is part of that discussion because it protects both parties. So we talk a little bit about why condoms are probably the predominant form of contraception that they will come in contact with first. We talk a little bit about the sexual politics surrounding condoms, i.e. the history of them, the fact that they were predominantly carried about by men, but women carry them around as well, and rightfully so. If you're going to be sexually active, you need to make sure that you protect yourself and that you're prepared. We talk about why they are particularly useful for not only preventing pregnancy, but also sexually transmitted infections. And then I talk a little bit about how they are only about 97% safe, and therefore we're talking about safer sex, not safe sex. The only safe sex is no sex, unfortunately. And then what I tend to do is show them what they look like in the packet, talk about the fact that they go out of date, show them how to open them carefully, talk about how you can how you look at a condom and tell whether it's the right way out, because that's quite important. And then I would show them how it goes onto a demonstrator. And then we talk about whether or not using 2 condoms is better, which of course it isn't, because the friction would cause them both to split. We talk about myths surrounding sex and condom use as well. And then we would open the discussion up to the practicalities of condoms and how, when you're in a longer term relationship, a different form of contraception might be preferred.
Over 7,500 primary schools are already using Kapow Primary to boost confidence in teaching foundation subjects. Our expert-created curriculum planning, lessons and CPD are here to support and upskill you, whether you're a subject lead or classroom teacher. If you've got knowledge gaps in art, music, computing or beyond, we've got you covered. Head to kapowprimary.com and empower your teaching today.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads, no distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Liz, there was another, you were talking about demonstrators to me before, weren't you? I think you had another anecdote.
Oh, what? About my own experience at school?
Yeah, I just want to wait for Rachel.
Well, there were no demonstrators in those days. My year group was quite small, so we were all kind of crowded into the social area for an assembly. It was, and our head of year, he got one of the boys up to the front. He gave him a banana, gave him a condom, threw a blanket over his head and went, right, practice. He said, you're going to do it in the dark. And that was sex education in the 90s, everybody. It was a very, very different time.
That's brilliant. Throwing the blanket on him, getting everyone to laugh about it, breaking the ice. What a legend that teacher was.
Absolutely.
You're not tempted to do the same thing when you were doing it?
No, do you know what? Because I was just so conscious about it going right. I would never. Obviously, the natural humour arises with kind of the discomfort around this, and that's fine. But I didn't want to. I was too nervous to put the humour into it, I think. But because I had the girls doing it and my colleague had the boys doing it, he told such a different story coming back to it. So he said about the demonstrators, as I've now learned is the term that I should use.
Demonstrators either.
No, I had no, but that makes sense, doesn't it? But he'd said, oh my gosh, he said,
demonstrators in real life as well now.
it was like within 5 minutes, he said they had it strapped to their heads. You know, I was just like, oh, girls didn't do that. It was very different, very, very different. Anyway, Rachel, we lost you. So
I don't know what happened there. I do apologise.
That's all right. I just went off telling about my own experience at school of sex education and how it involved a blanket, a banana and a condom in an assembly, which was not at all technical.
But I do think I heard the end of that story, and I do think it's a practical lesson to learn, you know. These things never happen in broad daylight when you've got all your faculties about you and all the rest of it. So
well, they shouldn't, unless you want to get arrested.
Indeed.
So that's probably quite an important part of the lesson as well.
From now on, I think I might use it. So, you know, it's oh no, someone sent me a photo of a demonstrator.
I'm quite intrigued by the fact that your demonstrators were blue. I'm not sure that's I'd be like, yes, gentlemen, if they're blue, that's definitely a reason to go down to your local sexual health clinic or your GP toot suite, I think.
They were I don't know
what was
who made them.
The blue demonstrator story, Liz. I remember you mentioned about some of the being blue and ordering them. Before.
Yeah, no. It was like that was the story I told earlier, just about my colleague bringing them in the sack, but you know the detail that goes into these demonstrators. I was like, is it necessary?
Yeah.
Are we going?
Mine.
If we're going to go anatomically correct, do they? You know what are we going for here?
Yeah, mine are fairly boring. They're like a child's drawing of a penis, but in hard plastic, which makes taking a condom off a little bit tricky. So you do have to preface what you're saying at the end of the condom lesson with, by the way, this will be easier when you're doing it to yourself, because this is an unwielding hard plastic. Thank you very much.
And also, don't worry if yours is not this big.
Or stuck on a small stand on a table. Yes.
With some suckers on the bottom.
Oh, there you go, Liz.
Oh no, I was just going to say, do you think, because I said about my own kind of experience of sex education in the 90s, obviously we've come a long way since then. Why do you think that is? Why do you think it's changed so much?
Which aspect are we talking about? You mean the fact of what we deliver?
It's so
okay.
Now.
Well, I just think we, for a long time, gave them the very perfunctory, you know, when you're an adult, you will potentially have sex because that's how babies are made. End of story. Don't do it before you're 16. Don't get pregnant. Don't catch a disease. Here's some condoms. It was just a bit slapdash, I think. Whereas I think we do a disservice to young people when we don't talk about the nuances around what sex is in a relationship. And the thing is when you're talking to teenagers, these are things that they're thinking a lot about because their hormones are all over the place. Obviously, they're seeing a lot of stuff in media, on the internet. I mean, they're just as curious as everyone has ever been when they're teenagers about sex. And I just think that now we've got to a point where we realize that if we talk to them about the things surrounding sex and much more about how our bodies work, which I think is really important as well, because women and men have different reactions to sexual contact and the biology of us works differently, and we expect and rightfully so, we expect our young men to understand our reproductive systems too, because we're trying to really demystify periods, and the only way to demystify sex, demystify periods, is to be open, honest, and give detail. They are interested in the details, and if they don't get the details from you, they will get details from somewhere else, and they may not be correct. So I think the thing is that for me personally, I would prefer to give them as much detail as possible once they get to the appropriate age. Obviously, it's different when you're teaching year 7 about these things than when you're teaching year 10. But I think it's important they have the details because they want to know. And like I said, it makes them better people to understand how our bodies work and how and how sex is very much part of an adult relationship, but part of a bigger picture of intimacy and respect.
Do you find that students come to you, because I find it very reassuring, I've always found it reassuring, even when we're at uni together, to listen to you about things. Do you find that you become the emotional adult where the students come and seek you out sometimes and to talk to you about things like this?
Yes.
Outside of the classroom?
Yeah, I do. And I have a number of students who I think, as you've discussed earlier, find my room a safe space. And that's, again, why I ended up running the Pride group at school, is because I want to make sure that students understand that as we know as teachers, we have to be really careful about disclosures and things like that. But I always want students to feel that they can come and talk to me about anything, and they do come after lessons and ask questions one-to-one. Sometimes that can be the fodder for a potential stand-up career later, and sometimes it's something where you're like, I'm just really glad you came and asked, because that could have led to much embarrassment later on. I definitely remember being asked if someone needed to sign something to give consent. And I definitely remember being asked what happened, because I was talking about circumcision, and that in America it's quite automatic, as opposed to our system in the UK, where you aren't circumcised unless obviously it's for medical reasons. And this child was very distressed at an up and coming holiday to America, and wondering whether he needed to not only give up his passport at the border, but also his foreskin. So it's it's one of those things where you're kind of like, this is, teaching is a brilliant job because it is so funny, but when you teach relationships and sex education, it's an amazing mix of hilarious but feeling like you're doing an important job at the same time.
You probably saved him months of anxiety, do you know what I mean? And that in itself, your job on earth is done. Do you see
I know. Your foreskin is safe. Go forth and enjoy Disneyland.
Go forth with your foreskin.
Go forth with your foreskin, yes.
I'm a demonstrator.
Oh gosh, I've snorted already.
Do you think, because obviously you are very knowledgeable, very trained in order to deliver it, is it better that they have lessons from you than from their parents? Because a lot of the things, like I certainly see, there always seems to be something new every week. And then teachers should be responsible for teaching children to use a knife and fork. Teachers should be responsible for making sure they're toilet trained at primary school. Teachers should be I'm pretty sure some of this is a parental job. Like, I'm pretty sure this does not fall to a teacher. But this, I wonder, is it actually better that it's delivered in school?
I think there's a couple of things there. Number one, you'd really hope that there's some kind of balance, and that they can go home and say, this is what we talked about in school. And some of my students do that because their parents are teachers at my school, and they come and say, oh yes, my son said about this and said it was really interesting, and and you get that kind of like, that's really good. But the reality of it is that some parents don't feel comfortable with it. Some parents from certain cultural backgrounds don't talk about sex at all at home and are quite glad that you do it at school. Some parents, that we know about, I haven't experienced this personally, but some parents do not like the idea that you're the one delivering the information, because they don't want their child to know about it until they're 25. And I think
no, I totally like me, as in I'm just making a joke.
some I think to some degree, I have the time, because it's part of my job, to do the research, watch the documentaries that are out there, look at what's being talked about, ask the students what's being talked about, and can then disseminate the information from the perspective of a specialist. And I think that helps. I don't think it should be the be all and end all of where the education happens, but I think if we can have some form of consistency within educational institutes on how it's delivered and the quality of what's being delivered, then that can only be a good thing. And I think what it does is it makes sure everyone has the correct information and somebody isn't wandering around. And I've spoken to you about this outside of this conversation as well, that I do think that there is part of a very healthy conversation between the students that happens after the lesson, where they discuss what's been discussed, and that is part of growing up and part of negotiating your space. And although we always say to them, it's not really appropriate to go shouting down the corridor about testicles and things like that, we have to accept that they're going to talk about what you've talked about, and rightfully so, because that's how they work stuff out.
It's all part of the processing of it, isn't it? And and actually that's what we want them to do in all of our lessons, isn't it? We want them to go away. Like, I don't want the learning to just happen in that 45 minutes that I see them. I want them to go away and I want them to have conversations about it. Like, the greatest thing for me is when a student comes back to you and says, oh, I went and watched that documentary, or I went and read about that, and you're just like, they are thinking about what I've taught them at home. They're having conversations over dinner at home about what we've just got, and that's great, because that they're learning, and you want them to learn all the time. So absolutely, those post-lesson conversations are crucial, and hopefully they've listened enough and they've absorbed enough in a mature enough way to have conversations in a constructive manner as well, and not put the fear of God into each other about about things.
And certainly for me, I want them in those moments when they're making decisions, or they are starting to explore their sexuality or becoming sexually active, to remember some of the things that have been said that should furnish them with the skills to negotiate adult issues, and to make them think twice before they decide to, go ahead of doing things without potentially thinking about condoms and things like that. You need that to stick, and you need it to last. And the only way that happens is if they are thinking about it outside of the room that you were in when you taught it.
How soon is too soon? Because, there has been a bit of controversy about what age we should start teaching sex education in schools. I mean, I'm in a secondary school, so I don't really know what's happening in primary school.
Well, when I speak to my year 7s, most of them are aware of obviously where babies come from. They are vaguely aware of puberty. Sometimes they find the lessons a little uncomfortable to begin with, and they're very often in very different places, depending on what their parents have said and what they've done in year 5 and 6. I think it's about the degree of detail and the amount of information, and whether you give the more nuanced arguments surrounding sex and intimacy. I think what you've got to say very, very early on is that your body is yours, and you are the one who has the power to consent or not to it being touched by anyone else. That's a really important lesson very early, and that you have things that are private and things that are public, and that you have a right to certain information as well. And I think you've got to be careful, but it's often about gauging what they already know and going from there. I mean, you will be surprised by the language that some year 7 and 8s have compared to others. There is a really big disparity in early secondary teaching of sex education.
And I think some of the arguments that are made revolve around the idea that if we're discussing it with them too early, are they therefore going to make the choices to have sexual relationships too early? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, me personally, I don't think that's what happens at all. And I think we are seeing that in statistical data of the number of young people who are not choosing to be sexually active as early as potentially past generations, in terms of young pregnancies, in terms of young people visiting sexual health clinics. Our young people are far more sensible than we were. Across the board, in terms of alcohol, in terms of drugs, in terms of smoking and vaping.
Generation exit.
Basically, I think young people are becoming much more sensible than we have in the past, and that is with more sex education in schools, more discussion about relationships.
I want to add something there. Sometimes, though, there is a moment where they're not. I remember I was at a school once doing some intervention tutoring, and there's a long corridor in the school where the children would hang out at break time and things. And I was just walking from one room to another, and I think they were year 10 or 11 boys, they ran past, and one of them literally put a condom over the other guy's head. I don't know how how he managed to do this, but so I thought, oh no, I have to intervene and say something. You know, when you just
oh blast! I've got to discipline someone about something. Damn it!
I don't normally have to discipline as a tutor. I haven't had to do it for years, and I was just thinking, oh, here we go, and they're going to say, who are you? Because obviously I'm a tutor, not a full-time teacher. There, they didn't know me. So I remember saying, sort of, oi, excuse me, can you unhand him?
Young man,
please remove the condom. Anyway, at first,
I love how Dickensian you did that.
Yes.
Unhand him.
And of course they don't listen. There's just some woman whispering behind this amazing, hilarious thing they're doing in public to their friends. You know, I was a bit worried at first it was bullying. You know what I mean? I wasn't sure whether it was a funny thing, a bullying thing, or what it was. I was pretty sure he hadn't consented to this. So, when I say his head, obviously I mean his actual head. You know?
Thank you. The clarification is noted.
Anyway, when I finally got him to take it off, they were just in fits of giggles, and I just said, is he your friend for a start, or to the one who'd had this happen to him? Yes, miss, we're friends, we're just mucking about. And I said, okay. And then I was sort of stumped. So I said, do you think, I said, actually, you come to walk to reception with me was the first thing. And I was amazed that this boy actually started to follow me towards reception, okay? And I thought, what am I going to say when we get to reception? So I just
just buying time.
I just said to him halfway there, I went, do you realise that was inappropriate? And he just went, yes. And I went, right, you can go. And then I went into the staff room, and I thought, I better report this. It's probably on a camera somewhere. I haven't given him a behaviour. So I went in there, and there was a lovely Scottish teacher in there, English teacher. And I just said to her, you know, oh, this just happened, and I'm a bit, you know, I'm not sure I dealt with it appropriately. And she said, oh, you missed a trick there. And I said, oh, I know, I should probably have given him a behaviour. And she went, no, you should have asked him why he couldn't think of a better use for it than that. I just thought that was brilliant. Why couldn't he thought of it? And I just said, yeah, I did miss a trick there. That would have been a genius thing to say. And then, you know, and that was the end of it. And I think so I do think sometimes just, yeah, letting them be kids as well a little bit.
They are, and the thing is in, you know, kids, although we talk about them statistically being much more sensible, kids are still bonkers. Kids are still nuts. They do crazy things. I mean, I'm on a kind of uphill battle sometimes with the graffiti sometimes in school. I mean, you know, the amount of penises drawn on things is quite prolific. And I mean, I've lifted up small flaps for a plug in the middle of the hall, and someone's drawn one on the inside, and you're kind of like, there is no surface that has remained untouched by graffiti. And also like, why? But also like, why do you feel a need to draw them everywhere? You have one. It's on the front of your body. You don't have to go far to see it. So why are you drawing pictures? I mean, I know they worship them, but why do you have to draw pictures of them all over the place?
Like,
really?
To worship. Like, I remember I was when I was teaching at a college in Cornwall, and when I was teaching English functional skills to students doing mechanics and some hairdressers, and there was one group that when I went in, and I thought, well, they'll be mature enough to, you know, not graffiti their English books. You know, they're college level now. They're doing functional skills. They're on a bricklaying course or a mechanics course. And of course, when I get the book, they're all very nice, very polite, listening to me, you know, going on about functional skills. And then they handed their books at the end, and it was all boys, and every single one of these guys had drawn a penis on the front of their book. And I was just thinking, great, and I'm a new person here. I've got to go and show this to my head of department, you know. Thanks, guys, you know. But in the mechanics course, happily there were some women in there, and what was great was that one of the women in particular, one of the girls in particular on that course, she did keep the boys in order a bit in terms of things like that. Oh, don't be so ridiculous. You'll give us a bad name and rein them in for me. So that was quite nice. She's a good mechanic too as well. So, yeah. But it is something that I think it takes a while for certain people to grow out of, shall we say?
Absolutely.
Oh, I think as English teachers, we deal, and as a drama teacher as well, like literature is full of sexual references, innuendo. I feel we are almost quite well placed in a way. It is a relatively natural segue for us to talk about these things, because we are dealing with it a lot of the time, and you have to deal with it sensitively when you're talking about it in literature. Obviously, they find it in places where it isn't as well. I told Kate a story this week. I'd forgotten about it until this week. I was teaching a particular poem. I can't remember which poem it was, but I just used the phrase colloquially, and he puts his wife up on a pedestal, and one boy in the corner of the room just went, and I was like, "You right, Josh? What's going on?" And he went, "Oh, it's just really funny, miss, on a pedestal. Can't believe you just said that." And I was like, "What's wrong with it? That's fine." And he went, "Well, that's where the Victorian men put their women to have sex with them." And I was like,
Hilarious.
Where did that come from?
I've never known it as a pedestal, but there you go.
I was like, there is a lot of innuendo in English literature. Unfortunately, that's not it here. So
No.
it's literally just like where you'd put a statue. It's just a place. There's not more to it than that. He was a bit disappointed.
Bless. Dreams of a pedestal in the future.
Disappointed. It was only the Victorians anyway, not modern.
The Victorians are very interesting. I often end up talking about the Victorians, like you say, in literature as well, because the Victorians had a very interesting attitude to sex, obviously. And one of the things I talk to the boys about is when in the Victorian era there was a theory that if you wanted to get pregnant and have attractive children, then the female needed to have an orgasm, which kind of meant that the men picked up their game a little bit in the bedroom. So the Victorians are interesting. My friend did a whole master's. My friend's dissertation was on Victorian pornography, which was incredibly interesting, about the theory in which these things were achieved and how anatomically they believed that women orgasmed, which was that there was a magic button at the top of our vaginas that if they hit it enough times would explode. Interesting. Like exploding women.
Like the weather presenters with their little button that changes the...
But the cartoon drawings of this that were around at the time were absolutely hilarious.
Do you know what? I think it's a bit of naivety there, because I just figured that pornography was a relatively modern thing, but of course it must have existed.
Literally, as soon as someone invented a camera and the ability to take a photograph, that was the first thing. Of course it was. It's like when, it's like, the minute you got a camera, you took a picture of your toe, or some boys take pictures of their hums. It's this weird thing of like, as soon as you're able to, you take pictures of things you shouldn't.
Why aren't there more demonstrators on the walls of caves?
Well, look at the man scrawled into the side of the mountain.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
exactly. Maypoles. We are a society filled with phallic imagery.
Yes,
that's absolutely.
And in Britain, what's quite hilarious, of course, is that we have a very funny relationship with the sexualization of women. I mean, I was saying to you earlier this week, wasn't I, that I had to teach Blood Brothers, and had to discuss with my year 8s why we had a sort of period of time in British film where sex comedies were a thing, where mostly women took their clothes off and men fell down ladders, through windows, or into baths, or showed their bums a lot. And then you talk about Page 3, and as a historical artifact, it's very difficult to explain that this was okay until pretty much recent history.
Yeah, the Carry On films were a big part of our childhood, weren't they?
Yeah.
It is an odd part of popular culture, isn't it? That just kind of it had its day, and we just accepted it, and nobody questioned it. And
and then lad culture in the 90s, FHM, etc., etc. Yeah,
loads of them. Yeah, it's weird. And obviously that had an impact on our generation and how we were perceived, and actually why a lot of us have so many body images, the body image issues these days as well, because it kind of boils down to that expectation that we were supposed to look a certain way, and whatever, so it feeds in. On that, do you think, because you were saying earlier that young people are more wise than we were when we were younger, do you think the internet has played a part in that? Has the internet helped? Has social media helped or hindered? What do you think?
I think that there are lots of advantages to social media, but it has to come with a massive warning sticker at the same time. I think the problem is that just as much information is available as misinformation, and we have to be super careful about making sure that young people understand that. It always surprises me when I see things on my social media saying, oh, in Finland, they teach students about fake news and how to be empathetic. I'm like, we teach that now in the UK. That's not a surprise to me. We are doing that already. Don't do our educators a disservice. You know, we are doing that. And I think that the internet can be an amazing place, and many amazing things can come from online. And when we sort of say young people are more wise, I'm not sure wise is the word. I'd say that they have more information, but they have more rubbish to wade through to get that information.
Yeah, it's true. And it's,
go on, Liz.
I was just saying, it's about, like you say, teaching them to sort through that. We've been teaching a media unit to our year sevens at the moment, like this, that's what we're in the middle of at the moment at the end of term, and talking to them about reading around a topic. Don't just accept the first thing that you're told. Just because someone hangs a stethoscope around their neck and makes a reel on Instagram or TikTok or whatever and tells you they're a doctor doesn't mean they are a doctor, and doesn't mean that the information that they're giving you is absolutely accurate. If they tell you something, you go away and you look it up and you find out if you can find several sources which confirm that, because if they don't, that's likely to be misinformation. You have to, but you've got to be bothered, haven't you, to do that, which...
It's difficult. When the internet first came around, we obviously as teachers suffered from Wikipedia overload. You'd send a student off to research something, and they'd come back with a copy and pasted document of misinformation mostly. But it's about the fact that we've got to stay one step ahead of things and frame everything in the right way. You know, take everything with a huge pinch of salt and make sure that you understand that, as you say, everything that you engage with online has a potential to be misinformation unless you've really, really dug into it, or you take it as one opinion of many.
Over 7,500 primary schools are already using Capel Primary to boost confidence in teaching foundation subjects. Our expert-created curriculum planning, lessons and CPD are here to support and upskill you, whether you're a subject lead or classroom teacher. If you've got knowledge gaps in art, music, computing or beyond, we've got you covered. Head to capelprimary.com and empower your teaching today.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads. No distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Yeah, and do you think that's the biggest problem facing young people at the moment, in kind of this area, or do you think there's something else that potentially...
I think probably one of the biggest issues for young people is well, it's like all of us. We live in a society that is massively divided, and divided in a very unhealthy way. That there is a lot of very dangerous stuff out there that offers people who feel alone, because let's face it, young people, one of their biggest fears is being labelled as different sometimes, weird or unusual. I mean, yes, as adults, you grow up and realize that your weirdness, your oddities, and your idiosyncrasies are a joy, and you find your tribe, etc., later on. But to a young person existing in the bubble of the school that is their majority of their life at that moment, they are desperate to be the same as everyone else. And if, for example, they are not, or feel they are not, they will find someone online that will say all the right things and will potentially make them feel like they're part of something. And that something is not necessarily something we want our young people to be a part of, which is why we have to remain vigilant, and we, as educators, and we have to make sure that parents understand, because I'm always surprised, I think, by, for example, when adolescence came out, there was nothing in that surprised me. But I know that a lot of my friends who are parents were absolutely shocked to the back teeth by some of the things that adolescence was presenting. And I think that there is too much of presuming that your child online is safe, and that isn't the case. And we have to keep talking about things. We have to keep engaging with young people and making sure that they understand that there are dangers out there. But we also have to, and I'm a strong believer in trying to be an optimist about these things, is that if you educate young people and furnish them with the skills and a sense of what is the right thing to do, and empathy, kindness, respect, all of those things are constantly reiterated but not banged on about and hit over the head with, that if you expect the best, then most of the time you get the best. And there will always be exceptions to that, but we have to just keep trying our best and keep trying to make sure that we do what we can do.
And you said earlier about running the Pride group, and obviously what you've just said feeds very, very crucially into that element of school life and having groups like that run. How do you tackle the topic of sexuality, gender identity, things like that when you're teaching RSE?
Well, what's really, really useful, and I know this sounds like I'm quoting from an Ofsted handbook, is the emphasis on fundamental British values. Within that, individual liberty, tolerance, respect, law are all laid out. And luckily for us, Britain has these values that they hold up as what we should be like. We are not there yet, but we definitely want to aim in that direction for sure. So I feel completely protected in the fact that when I talk about sexual relationships, I don't talk exclusively about cisgendered relationships or heterosexual relationships. I talk about partners. I talk about consensual adults who are old enough to consent, and whether that is a male female partner is irrespective of the information given. When we talk about sex in and of itself, we never talk about just, for example, vaginal intercourse, or we talk about all the different aspects of sex, and that goes for any kind of couple. So it's about being really inclusive in the language you use and not making it potentially a big thing, but saying this is how we discuss relationships. It doesn't matter who your partner is. It doesn't matter whether you are two men, two women, and they do ask questions. And it's important that, again, you answer very matter-of-factly, and you say to them, you know, the world is a varied place, and who you choose to have a relationship with. And by the way, I always view sexuality not as a choice, as something that you discover as you are becoming attracted to people. Then you will realize that you have a right within living within Britain to be with the person that you want to be with. When it comes to gender, I very much talk about the fact that some people are not born into the bodies that they feel they identify with, and that can be a very, very confusing and very, very difficult time for that person. But we teach it definitely with an understanding of kindness and empathy, and it can be really challenging in a very male-centric environment sometimes, where there is a level of locker room banter, and that kind of thing. But that's when these spaces like the Pride group are incredibly important. And we also get people in from the outside to discuss these things, because like I said, sometimes I'm a bit like, oh, it's Mrs. Gilyeat, you know, she's always talking about these things. I think I've said to you before that once I started a lesson saying to my year 8s, right, we're going to talk about puberty. And this year 8 looked at me like he was an 80-year-old man and said, oh, I've heard about you. You're kind of like,
Your
my reputation precedes me.
Used to blink, just out staring.
But yes, I think whenever we're talking about relationships and sex education, it's about being inclusive in the right way, i.e., we're not talking exclusively about men and women. We're not talking just about like sex between two men being completely different to sex between two women. It's about sex as an entire umbrella of many different things. And sex is not just intercourse. So that's what's really important as well.
And all the positive sides of it, not just the negative sides of sex, like the the joyful side as well.
The earliest lessons always start with, why do we have sex? Because we procreate. Why else do we have sex? Because it feels good and it's part of a relationship and intimacy and closeness and respect and all those things. And talking about when you are invested in someone else's engagement in sexual activity, it's about making sure they are happy, they are comfortable, and that's part and parcel of relationships.
It is an expression of trust, isn't it, as well? So,
and I think that's one of my questions was going to be about what would you say is a key message, but I feel like that is the key message, isn't it? It's about everybody feeling safe, everybody feeling included, everybody feeling like, you know, this is something that everybody wants and everybody is kind, empathetic, everything, just all of those things that you've just summed up. And we've come to the end of our hour, which is it just went really quickly, didn't it?
Yeah.
So thank you, Rachel, so much for coming on.
No problem at all.
It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. You are obviously so incredibly knowledgeable and kind in the way that you deliver things. And I think I would, going back 25 years, I think I would have liked to have been in your classroom and learning.
I think you come back as well in the future, and perhaps
definitely
people to write in with questions, maybe parents to write in with questions about advice, how to talk to their teenagers or younger children. Yeah, I think it would be if you would be happy to do that. That would be amazing.
Of course.
That'd be amazing. Before we finish, I'm just going to have another word from our sponsors. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to our weekly newsletter. It's called Sound Bites and Insights, and it's delivered to 10,000 educators a week. It contains a curated selection of 4 standout TTR shows from the week, exclusive discounts and exclusive offers from our sponsors. Sign up on our website at ttradio.org/newsletter. And this show has been brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources. They support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Thank you guys so much. I've really enjoyed it.
No problem at all. Absolutely loved it.
In 2 weeks' time. Thank you so much.
Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.